We thank you all for joining us on this Thursday evening. My name is Amie Kromis. I am Fuqua class of 2019 and also co-chair of the Duke DC Professional Development Committee. And I will turn it over then to Emma Welch, who's class of 16 and a former LinkedIn employee who's also excited to help Duke alumni increase their credibility and networking opportunities on the platform. And during her time at LinkedIn, Emma was specifically focused on helping users develop their LinkedIn profiles and content strategies. And just to put the cherry on top, she also currently serves on the Southern California Alumni Board. So we are going to turn it over to Emma to educate us on all things LinkedIn.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. It's so great to see you all. I'm going to give one more shout out to all my 2016ers in the audience. Thanks for joining in. Like Amie said, I worked at LinkedIn and just recently left the amazing LinkedIn family a couple months ago. My work at LinkedIn was focused really heavily on helping content creators and public figures develop their LinkedIn content strategies. And that involved developing their profiles. And today we're going to focus a lot on profile development and just making sure that you're good to go if you just want to have your LinkedIn profile and sort of do nothing else with it. Don't create content. If that's your goal for this, hopefully you come away from this presentation like good to go and you've got everything you need. If you are interested in going really deep into your content creation and thought leadership, that is very much what I specialize in. And we're going to touch on that a little bit today, but let's start with why bother with LinkedIn. So when we were at LinkedIn, we loved this stat that there's a person hired every minute via LinkedIn, or 6 people hired every minute via LinkedIn. So it's just kind of the place to be if you're looking for a job. And there was a question that we got. We actually submitted questions ahead of time when you registered for the event. And there was a question that we got about, what do I do if I want to talk about things unrelated to my career on LinkedIn? And while LinkedIn is great for obviously getting a new job, it's also a great place to kind of develop a side career or thought leadership, or if you've got a book or you want to be on boards or you want to do speaking engagements and all that amazing stuff. LinkedIn is a great place to kind of develop your personal brand and become somebody who can be hired for those things. So definitely worth your time. And at the very least, having a really well thought out and crafted profile will go a long way. So let's actually talk a little bit about personal brand. So if anybody is comfortable, feel free to answer these questions in the chat. But our personal brand is really about how we want to be seen to the world. So like I said, if you're really here to talk about your career and get a new career or a new job, then LinkedIn's great for that. But it's also, do you want to be seen as a person who's kind of doing things outside of your career and maybe has a different interest or path that you're pursuing outside of that? And LinkedIn is a great place for you to kind of show off and peacock those extra skills that maybe you don't get to do in your day-to-day in your office. So like I said, if you're comfortable, answer the questions. How do we want to be seen? What is our content style? And you might be thinking, I don't post on any social media. I don't have a content style. But we all know that we think about what our content style would be if we started posting. So what do you want your digital presence to be like? What would you want someone to see your content and think about you? Who do you want to be talking to? And what is really your thing that you know that you're an expert on? And I will say LinkedIn is great. Having a basic LinkedIn profile is really all you need to get a job. But having an awesome LinkedIn profile is going to help you really stand out in a saturated space and really take things to the next level. So that's why we're here today. And I will say this event is awesome. Having a LinkedIn profile is awesome. But all of you on this event are so lucky to have access to the DC Professional Development Committee, who's putting on amazing events for you. So at the end of the day, nothing beats in-person networking with other Duke alums. So make sure you go to those events and have your LinkedIn profile and do all the things, but they all kind of go hand in hand. So starting out really simple with a profile photo. Sounds like something really simple. This is something that we get a ton of questions about because people don't really know how to navigate this. I will give a shout out to my Duke SoCal board member, Kareem Cook, whose photo I stole for this. He's got a great profile photo. So Justin in here is recognizing Kareem. I think a bunch of people are. He's a great LinkedIn example in general. If you all want to go take a look at his LinkedIn, and he's also a great alumni. So he's really willing to talk. So not to get him unsolicited chats on LinkedIn, but Kareem's awesome. So what do we want to do for our profile photo? We want to keep it as really basic as possible. So keeping our background really plain, keeping our face about 70% of the frame. Now you can see like in Kareem's photo, it's his chest and face. That's fine. It's just kind of like yourself needs to be about 70%. If you want to zoom in a little bit further, that's good too. Yeah. Andrea is calling out that his face is not 70. Yeah. We just need like you to be 70%. We don't want a dog in there, another family member. That can be really confusing. So just making sure that you are taking up 70% of the frame. Don't use a filter. So Luis and I had a conversation about this prior to this event, because when you go to upload a photo on LinkedIn, it gives you an option to use LinkedIn generated filters. Those, for the most part, are going to be totally fine. What we mean when we say don't use a filter is don't make it black and white. Don't use a dog Snapchat filter. Don't make yourself look totally crazy, not like you, all that kind of stuff. The LinkedIn filters are mostly AI generated correction filters, just to like make you look a little bit more perfect. That's fine. We're all guilty of doing that. But we just don't want it to distract from ourselves. And then something I will say, speaking of filters and making it look like yourself, another one of the questions that got submitted to us before the event was about ageism on LinkedIn and in the career search process in general. And we really want to make sure, and help with that a little bit, that our profile photos look like us. So I know that it is annoying to go out there and take a brand new headshot all the time, but we really want it to be as up to date and fresh and realistic as possible. So if your LinkedIn profile photo is 20 years old, I'm talking to you right now, go outside with really good lighting, grab your partner, your child, and get them to snap a really good picture of you outside. It doesn't have to be a professional quality headshot. It can just be taken with an iPhone. And like I said, a neat background and clear. And we just don't want to look like somebody else when we show up for an interview. So that's our most important thing. And then I have fun on here. So what I mean by that is if you're in a creative field, we are okay to be a little bit creative in this. Again, we want our face to be taking up most of the frame, but let's say you're, an illustrator or something, and you want your photo to be of you like drawing. That's fine. We can be at a desk working, sort of in an action pose or whatever, but we want it to still be 70%. And then just got a question from Rachel on the photo. Is it okay to have close up on face and head that's maybe 95% of the circle? Yes. I would we don't want it to be like overwhelming of like your face. So it's totally fine to be more than 70%. We just don't want other people in the frame. And if we are going to do an activity or something, or even what you're wearing, we want it to be really representative of who you are and what you do for work. So if you're in a field where you wear a suit every day, then it's probably best to be in a suit for your profile photo. If you aren't and you wear t-shirts to work, and this is me talking as a Southern Californian, so maybe this isn't relevant to DC and New York, but if you wear t-shirts to work every day, it's okay to be in a t-shirt in your profile photo. So we want it to sort of all be kind of themed together. And then something that I see all the time on LinkedIn is when you update your LinkedIn photo, we want to make sure that it's actually visible to everybody that finds you on LinkedIn. And I know that we're all super sensitive of privacy online, and we will go into some of the other privacy settings on LinkedIn later that make it easier or harder for people to find you or message you. But I think at a minimum, it's good to have your LinkedIn photo visible to everybody who's searching for you online. even if everything else kind of locked down. So make sure when you upload a photo that you're going in and you're saying that anybody on or off LinkedIn can find this photo. That also means that more likely than not, when somebody Googles you, the first photo that's going to show up under images is going to be of your LinkedIn photo, which is good because you're selecting it and you have kind of control over that. And you're giving a nice, realistic, professional view of yourself versus all the other photos that could show up of you. So now that being said, if you're famous or well regarded in your space, it may not be the first photo that shows up of you, but it's a best practice for most people. Awesome. And then moving on to our cover photos, I think a lot of people kind of skip this and keep it blank, but it is such a large plot of real estate. And we just want to make sure that we're really taking advantage of it in some way. So once again, we have Cream Cook with his brand's name on his cover photo. So he is one of the founders of Nature-Aid, and it's a great place for you to kind of immediately go to his profile and see this. And then I found another Duke alum from the DC area who has a Duke photo as their cover photo. Now, this is great. I will say it's so much better than having it blank. If you're looking for a cover photo to use, Duke's a great option. If you work for a really big company, email your HR or your social team at your company and say, I would like to update my LinkedIn cover photo. Chances are they have one made and they're like wishing that everyone at your company would make one. And they're going to be so happy that you asked. Location. So that kind of goes to sort of like Duke, if that's still in your recent past, or my cover photo is a like sky shot of Los Angeles because that's where I'm based and it makes it very obvious to people. And if you are looking for royalty-free photos to use, I will say Duke offers some, if you Google like Duke Zoom backgrounds or whatever for free, that are royalty-free, but also I really love unsplash.com for royalty-free images. And you can filter by size and shape. So you can actually look for ones that are horizontally oriented for your LinkedIn background. And if all else fails and you are an entrepreneur and you have your own company, Canva is great for creating these. We love Cream's profile. It's awesome, but something we do just want to call out is be really mindful of where your profile photo sits within your cover photo. So Cream's photo is actually covering some of the words of Nature-Aid. Now, his profile is covered with Nature-Aid, so he's getting it across one way or another, but it would be awesome if we could kind of adjust that to the right side so that it would be really visible. I'll also say that something I see, I know there's some authors in our audience today who asked a couple questions about that. We see a lot of people showcasing their book cover and the link to buy their book and stuff like that in their cover photo. So it's a really good place for that kind of thing. And then Greg Farley asked, what are your thoughts about using AI generated headshots? So you'll see in this conversation that we're having today, I'm very pro AI. LinkedIn is owned by Microsoft. They have integrated a ton of AI into their systems. So we love AI, but I would think about what's like relevant to your industry. So is it weird that you're going to have an AI generated headshot? Is that something that kind of like fits into your space? I shouted out Justin Galani from Duke SoCal, who's in this chat today. He works in the kind of like Web3 space. So for someone like him, it makes a ton of sense. But I know there's a ton of you today that work in government or have very kind of formal jobs. And I'd probably recommend just taking a selfie on your iPhone instead of an AI generated headshot, because they're great, but they're still a little bit obvious that they're AI. But I think it's very cool if you're in tech or something and you want to experiment with that. So, okay. Our headlines. So also took another Duke alum's example of this, Susan Gordon, who works at Duke. Some of you may know her through being involved with Duke. She's got a great headline. So the first thing I want to call out about our headlines is that they are searchable. So when we're talking about recruiters finding us on LinkedIn, we want to make sure that our keywords are really clear in here and that the things that you think people are going to be searching to find you, the jobs that you want, that those headlines line up with like what you're saying in yours. And we also want it to kind of showcase our most important things. So Susan, for example, hers goes over 3 lines when it's on mobile. It's probably 2 lines on desktop. I think that's like the max I would do. I see a lot of people shouting out like every press feature they've had, every little thing, mentor to these people kind of things. And it gets really, really long. So just be mindful of that and really keep it like shortened to your most important things and the things that you really think people are going to be searching by. And also like, what are you most proud of and what do you want to lead with? So again, we've had people asking like, what do I do for things that are outside of my career that I want to talk about on LinkedIn? Like, you need to have a little bit of a reassessment of like, what is most important to me moving forward? Do I want to highlight the thing that is outside of my career first in my headline so that people really find me as an author or speaker first? Or do I want people to find me for new job opportunities through this? So just highlighting those things. And then my favorite hack for headlines is find somebody at your company that you can kind of steal their headline. And I know that maybe seems like, we don't want to be stealing everybody's stuff, but headlines are really short. They're really generic. It's a really easy thing to just kind of find somebody that you admire and take their headline. If you work at a really big company, people who work in sales tend to have really good headlines. So find somebody at your company that works at sales and see what they're seeing about your company and kind of like take that and adapt it to your world. And emojis are totally okay. But we want to really make sure that we don't use them in our name. So I see a lot of people on LinkedIn. So just with my pointer, hopefully you can all see this. See a lot of people on LinkedIn putting it actually in where Susan has Susan Gordon. They'll do like a sunshine emoji or something like that. That actually affects your searchability on LinkedIn. So if someone looks for you by your name, they will not be able to find you because of that emoji. So if you have an emoji in your name, please, if you do nothing else from this, please go take that out. But they're totally fine to have in here. They're not going to affect your searchability. But just like profile photo, just like using an AI generated photo, let's kind of like think about the context of who you are and what you're trying to get across. I would only recommend emojis if you're in a fun or creative field and it feels really natural for you. If you're in something really formal, you don't need to have them. They're not going to like add to your situation. And the other thing we get a lot of questions about is at versus at. So the at sign versus actually writing like I work at Duke University. And it does not matter. It's not going to affect your searchability. The question again kind of goes back to emojis and it's like, are we trying to be fun or are we trying to be formal? So, and then Rachel in the comments asked, is it better for us to give a title or a concept? That's really going to kind of go to like what you want to be searchable for. So if you are looking specifically for new jobs as an assistant VP or VP of ESG, then it's good to like put that in because that's what recruiters are going to be searching for. If you want to get speaking opportunities or podcast interviews or whatever based on a sort of general theme of things that you know about and talk about, then I would use some of the more conceptual titles. So hopefully that helps. Okay, this is the scariest thing we're going to talk about today. This is the thing that everyone hates the very most, and that is our summary section on LinkedIn. And really quickly, sorry, Rachel just asked a follow-up question in the chat. Can you put assistant VP if that's not your current job? I would not do that. I would put what your current job is. But what we can do is we can put searching for assistant VP roles in our summary, which is also searchable, which I'll talk about now. So your summary is really going to be where you get to directly say what you want. And if there's anything else that I can give you in this presentation, it's do say what you want in your summary. Because for the most part, people who are kind of casually perusing your LinkedIn are not going to read your summary. The people who are going to read it are recruiters and people who are really looking in depth at you to hire you for something. So don't be afraid to really come right out with what you want to say. Now, that can be, I'm looking for a new job. That can be, I'm looking for speaking opportunities. Or that can be, if you're trying to keep it really vague so that you're kind of generally open to opportunities, but you're not looking necessarily for a new job, you can say like, I'm looking to develop XYZ skill. I'm looking to showcase my expertise in XYZ thing. And we want it to be at least 40 words long. That should be really easy. And what I really would encourage you all to not be afraid to do is to go to ChatGPT, put your LinkedIn profile link in there and ask it to write you a summary. Or if you go into your LinkedIn summary right now, LinkedIn has ChatGPT integrated, so it will write one for you. It's going to be crazy, but it gives you a place to narrow it down and to add your own stuff and really figure out what you want to talk about in your summary. So I would really encourage you right now to all give that a try. And yeah, so I'm just reading through some of the questions that have come in through the chat. So yep, your summary is your about section, and Greg's is several paragraphs, which is fine, but I would really maybe like assess, is there a way to kind of like cut it down a teeny tiny bit, just because we want people to actually read it. And think about what you would read if you ended up on somebody's profiles. We want it to be at least 40 words. We do not want it to be a whole paper's length. We want it to be maybe like 2 to 3 paragraphs. It's also a really good place to kind of like showcase your personality and talk about your hobbies or things you're interested in. If you're trying to kind of be seen as, you know, outside of just your professional on LinkedIn. So in ChatGPT, you can literally take your profile link on LinkedIn and you can copy and paste your profile link into ChatGPT and say, can you write me a profile summary based on this person's LinkedIn profile? And yes, to Jeanne's point, your summary is keyword searchable. So like I said, go in ChatGPT, write your profile, let it write your profile, and then use that as a base. We don't want to just take that. As amazing as ChatGPT is, it's better to kind of like take that as a starting point and then work our own way into it and talk a little bit more about what we really want out of it and adding in keywords that you think are relevant to your industry. Okay. And if anybody is taking pictures or screenshots of any slides, this is one that I highly recommend. So these are also, you could go into ChatGPT and you could take your profile and you could paste it into ChatGPT and say, can you write me a summary that answers this question or answers these 2 questions or whatever. And these are some of the questions that we would love to see answered in summaries, right? So, why are you an expert in your field? What sort of experiences are you trying to highlight from your work experience? Do you have any specific like awards that you want to highlight? All that kind of stuff. Pick which of these questions is most valuable to you. And if you're very against AI for some reason, I would go through and I would write my summary by answering these questions, just like you were answering a test. Just go through and answer these and then kind of compile what you have from there. So everyone get a screenshot of this. Cool. So now we're going to talk about moving further down our profile into work experience. So one of the questions that we got ahead of this event was, what is sort of the comparison to my LinkedIn profile versus my resume? And obviously we all know that resumes are recommended to be about 1 page in length. And I would ignore that completely for your LinkedIn profile. Your LinkedIn profile is your space to be as wordy and comprehensive and detailed as possible, because there is no page limit, right? Like hypothetically, if you printed it out, it could be longer than a page, but people aren't really viewing your LinkedIn that way. So I would give as much detail as possible for each work experience. And what I most love about adding in work experience on LinkedIn is that if you have a specific award that you won in a role or a campaign that you're like, I did that when I was at that job and I want people to know, you can add in rich media underneath each of your job experiences on LinkedIn. So when you go in to add a job experience through the LinkedIn platform, it'll give you the option to add rich media or add media. That's where you can add URL links to press releases about things that you've worked on, or photos of you at events, or actual videos from, whatever you produce. So definitely be as comprehensive as possible as that. And really, something that you can do great on LinkedIn that you can't really do on your regular resume is really saying, like, this is the impact that I made and the thing that I did in this job. And don't be afraid to really call that out, and you can use first person in here. And Jeanette in the chat is asking about volunteer experience, especially if it's an area that we want to get more into. I love that. So there is a separate section on LinkedIn for volunteer experience. But if it's something that really took up a good chunk of your time, or you really want to kind of make it more of your career, I would recommend adding it in as work experience. And this kind of goes to another question that we got ahead of time, which was, if you're fresh out of college and you're like, I don't really have work experience, what do I add in here? This obviously needs to kind of be adapted as we move into our careers, but early on, it's totally okay to add in student leadership and student volunteer experience and part-time jobs as work experience on your LinkedIn. And unlike on your resume, LinkedIn gives you a really long, great space to be able to say, this is why this is relevant to the jobs that I'm looking for. And, this is how this was really a job while I was a student. So definitely take the time to do that and add in everything. Also, I would be as comprehensive as possible in your work experience. If you have a long, amazing career, I would add in stuff that doesn't always seem super relevant anymore, just because you never know who's going to be interviewing you or looking at your stuff and be like, oh my gosh, we both worked at Baskin Robbins back in the day. That's so funny. I'm actually going to reach out to that person because of this. And as we get more into our work experience and you have more jobs, we can start moving some of our student experience and our volunteer experience into our education and volunteer sections below. And Dana asked if we can reorder the sections to move our volunteer experience higher than our work experience. You cannot on LinkedIn right now. But if your volunteer experience is really important to you, I would just add it in as work experience. It's not hard and fast that, you have to put it in the volunteer section. And then Mary asked if you're older and you, much of your work experience, how much should you post of your work experience? We want it to make sense, but we also want it to be comprehensive. So if you, the example I always think of is my father worked at Arthur Andersen, which is, in whatever version of it is today, but there's such an alumni base to have worked there. Sorry, totally lost track. So adding it in is kind of fun because people will reach out and be like, oh, I also worked there. But if it's totally irrelevant and you've been in the workforce for 50 years, then just maybe put in your highlights and stuff like that. Amazing. Okay. And Greg asked if there's a way to not include dates on work experience. So you have to at least put in your age, the years of work, not month of work experience. So you will need to do that. If you're really concerned about the years, then you can omit that experience from your profile. But I would recommend leaning in on your age and experience and not trying to hide that from employers. Amazing. Okay, and speaking of, here's our volunteer experience. It's a great way to, like we said, round out your professional identity if it's something sort of additional to what you're doing. And also in this kind of blurred out photo right here, you can see the order that somebody asked about, the order for these sections. So it does go job experience, education, and volunteer experience. So volunteer experience sits kind of low down on your profile. So make sure that if it is something really important to you, that you're putting it in as work experience. So if you were a board member for something, or you really planned a specific event or anything like that, you can add it in. And then somebody on here, Samantha asked, what do I mean by adding in media under work experience? So this is not the exact same thing because this is volunteer experience, but when you add in work experience, you'll have this little pencil next to that job. And when you click on that, and you're given the opportunity to say the years that you worked there and the description of the job and the industry, there's also a section for you to add in media underneath each of the job listings that are related to that job listing. And then Kieran asked, how do we balance in our description sections, job descriptions versus company descriptions? So I would stick mostly to job descriptions. If you are at a very small company or a company that is like a startup or something that people haven't heard of or might not know what the company does, I think it's worth putting in a company description there. But otherwise, I would stick to job description. If you worked at something like, in Senate, everyone knows what that is. So you can just, put what you did there. And as you can tell, I don't work in a government job, so I hope my government job examples are good for all you DC folks. And then education, this should be a no-brainer for all the Duke people on here, but we want to make sure that we add in Duke so that when you are connecting with other Duke alums on LinkedIn, that they know that you are a Duke alum and all that. There's a lot of questions about grades and activities and all that sort of thing. I would say if you're more than 5 years out of Duke, we don't really need to know your grades. And we do not necessarily need to know what organizations you were a part of. And if you're less than 5 years out and you have very limited work experience and you want to put those activities in your work experience instead of in education, that's totally fine. You can put them in both or in just work experience. But if you're trying to move something away from your work experience, putting it back down in education is a great place to put it. And you do have the ability to omit your graduation year on education. I know there's a lot of concerns about that. Awesome. Okay. Now we're going to get a little bit into creating content. So we got a couple of questions about what do I talk about on LinkedIn? So we have a couple of content creation ideas on here for you. So obviously, if there's something big happening in your life, like an announcement or a graduation or something like that, that is such a no-brainer to post on LinkedIn, gives everybody an update of what you're doing with your life, but also gets a ton of engagement and it's just really no-brainer. Sharing work events. So if you ever go to a happy hour with your coworkers or a event that you planned, and you take photos, those are great to show on LinkedIn. I think a lot of people avoid sometimes showing visual content on LinkedIn. They think that it needs to be like a text-driven post, but really photos are great. And they honestly get really good engagement. So post that. And then my favorite thing to tell people if you're completely at a loss of like, I want to be a thought leader on LinkedIn, but I don't know what to talk about. If you go to your LinkedIn homepage on your desktop, there will be in the top right-hand corner, this huge section that you probably never noticed before, LinkedIn News, that is bullet points of the things that are happening in the world right now, but specifically in the world of work. So when I worked at LinkedIn, we sat next to the editorial team at LinkedIn, which is a whole team of former newspaper editors and journalists who spend their entire days making sure that anything relevant is created on LinkedIn News as a thing for you to talk about. And if you click into one of those headlines, you'll see that there are actually posts featured under those headlines of people who have talked about that topic. So if you are at a complete loss of what to talk about, I recommend checking in on this every day and seeing if there's anything relevant that you can talk about in here. And there's a chance that your post could even get featured underneath that news post, which is just really great exposure. And also for people outside of knowing that this exists, it just looks like you're really up to date on the news and you really know what you're talking about. So highly, highly recommend this. It's like a cheat code for LinkedIn. And then outside of that, there's all this sort of like general thought leadership. So your leadership advice, things you learn, lessons you learn along the way, anything you're trying to promote or anything like that. And Leah just asked again where this is. So this is when you just go to like linkedin.com and you're logged into your account and you see your feed of all of everybody else's posts. This is top right-hand corner. And if you're in mobile, it's really tricky to find a mobile. But if you're in mobile and you go to your search, so like just where you would look to look somebody up and look down in the suggested search, it's down in there. It's much easier to interact with on desktop. And we got some great example posts here from Duke alums and our very own Amie Kromis, who's on this call, who posted about a Duke, like a little Duke shout out. So I will say Duke events, regional events that you go to are a great thing to post about. It's a great way to engage with other alums and tag them. So at the very least, go to a Duke event, take a photo, post it on LinkedIn. It's really easy. And then on the right here, we have an example of engaging with one of those LinkedIn topics. So you can see at the bottom here, it's Netta Dobbins on LinkedIn. So Netta is one of the editors at LinkedIn. She wrote this, and this person is, it's Netta herself, is reposting it with some like additional context to that trend. Amazing. And then if you get into the habit of posting, something that is so great on LinkedIn is you can feature your favorite posts on the top of your profile. So all you have to do, this is what it looks like on the right. It shows up right underneath your location and name and industry. So it's right at the top of your profile. And when you have done a post, what you can do is you can click on the dots on the top right of that post and then start to feature it on top of your profile. You can feature up to 6 things. And this is a great place for you to show off new job announcements, or if you've been featured in any press, I would highly recommend featuring that at the top of your profile. So there will be people who will go to your profile and they will read your entire summary and they will look through every single thing you've ever posted, but there will also be people that will not. And those people are just going to read your headline and they're just going to look at your featured content. So think about that when you're picking what to feature, is like, what do I want somebody to see if they're only reading my headline and they're only seeing my featured content? And then when we are posting, just some general tips to remember, 2 to 3 times a week is sort of like our amazing optimal posting habits on LinkedIn, but that's also a lot of work. So I would recommend once a week if you're just getting started with posting on LinkedIn. And remember that consistency is always going to be our most important thing for sharing on all channels. So making sure that you set the time on your calendar to just do 1 post a week and varying that content to be like, let me go see what's in the news today on this day that I'm seeing. Is there anything that's in those LinkedIn news bullet points that is relevant for me to talk about? And if so, done, you're good to go. You can write something about that. And if there isn't, is there something from a recent event I can post? Is there a lesson I learned this week or in the last month that I can sort of like impart onto people? Do I have a big announcement coming out or something like that? And really varying our content so that it's not just the same thing over and over again, and that we're really kind of being diverse with what we're posting. And there was somebody very advanced who asked us ahead of time, what is the LinkedIn algorithm weighing the heaviest right now? And what I will tell you as a former LinkedIn employee, so I can share all the secret information with you all, is that they really are focused on content that drives conversation right now. And what that means in reality is content that is getting a lot of comments. So what I would really encourage, if you're trying to dive really, really deep into your content creation journey, I would ask a question at the end of your post, really kind of try to get people engaged. A tip that I used to give content creators when I worked at LinkedIn was asking things that are like really easy to answer. So like, what's a brand you think is doing this really well? So that everybody's comments can just be like 1-word answers. And I will say that commenting back to people who are commenting on your posts is a really good way to up your overall content or comment numbers, because they do add to your comment numbers. So you can literally double your comment numbers by replying back to people. And we had a couple questions about mentioning people and hashtags and all that kind of thing. And the thing that we want to remember here is that nobody likes being spammed. Nobody wants to see content that is just like 100 million hashtags that are irrelevant to the post because they know you're like trying a little too hard. So we want to be mentioning people who are relevant to the post. So if you go to a Duke event, I'm actually going to go back because Amie's is a really good example of this. So she tagged people who she was actually with at the event, and she tagged Duke for, making the connection happen. But she tagged the hashtagged the actual organization that they were there supporting. She didn't add any extra hashtags that were unnecessary, like hashtag women. If you think about the last time that you were on LinkedIn and you were browsing through hashtag women, it was probably never. So think about, what you're actually using, and don't just try to like spam everybody with random hashtags. And then, like we said, photos are great, including visuals, just helps everybody enjoy the content more. Now, we got a ton of questions about connection requests on LinkedIn. So if you are starting fresh on LinkedIn and you are looking to get your connections from 0 to 1, a great way to do this is to look up former colleagues and to also look for Duke people. And hopefully we're all accepting connection requests from our fellow alumni, but I think it's worth mentioning that when you send out connection requests, you can add in a little note. And I think it's worth mentioning that you are a Duke alum, and that's maybe why you're sending the person a connection request. And the better our Duke alumni network on LinkedIn can be, the better our alumni network will be in real life. So definitely maybe make that a priority if you're starting from scratch on LinkedIn. If you are looking to kind of network with recruiters, or you're open to opportunities, but you're maybe not necessarily like actively looking for a new job, it's definitely worth searching for people in the search bar right here. By keywords. So what jobs are you looking for? Are you looking to relocate to a different location? Are you looking to work for a specific company? You can find people on there through this and send them a connection request, message them, ask them to connect with you, and just kind of use LinkedIn as like a big directory for finding people that you might want to network with. And then we have groups. Now, I saw a shout out by Luis earlier on in the chat. There is a Duke and DC LinkedIn group. Highly, highly recommend joining the group. And when you search for groups on LinkedIn, it will recommend some to you based on your work experience, but you can also search for things. And there are a shocking number of groups out there that might be relevant to your interests. There are groups for remote workers. There are groups for people who are looking to be self-published authors. Whatever it is, it's a really, really good place to find people who are actively talking about the thing that you want to do on LinkedIn. My biggest advice for groups would be to just find ones that are really active. So there are a lot of dead groups on LinkedIn just because people have really good ideas, and then people don't necessarily feel comfortable posting about their experience in the group or whatever. So we want groups where you see really active posts and really active members of those groups. And in addition to our Duke DC LinkedIn group, there is a Duke Alumni Network group on LinkedIn as well. They verify your graduation year. So when you join, they're going to look you up in the directory. So it'll take a couple of days to approve you, but it's great because then you know that everyone in there is like really a Duke alum, and it's really a safe space to be. And then Justin Galani, Justin, I think you said that to just the hosts and panelists. So if you want to send that to everybody, there is also a group for Duke Entertainment Media and Arts Network. And I'm sure there are groups for Fuqua and other affinity groups that I am not aware of. So if you know any, please drop the links in there right now. And here are some examples of ones that you can search for. Okay, and then this is the section of my presentation that are kind of fit into like random things that I just think are so amazing that we need to tell you that don't necessarily fit into other things. So one of my very favorite features on LinkedIn is that you can set profile alerts for people. So what that means is that you will see, you'll get a notification when they post or when they update their job description or whatever. So if you're the kind of person who has mentors or people that you're just kind of trying to keep tabs on so that you can send them an email every now and then to keep that networking connection alive, it's really good to set profile alerts for them. And so when you go to somebody's profile, you will see in the top right-hand corner this little bell-shaped icon here. When you click on that, you'll get a notification that you'll now receive notifications for all new posts from that person. It's awesome. People are going to think you're so on it because every time they announce something new, you're going to be the first person to email them and say, hey, I saw that you did this, and it's awesome. And then I'll touch on this a little bit. We got a lot of questions about LinkedIn Premium and whether or not it's worth it. And The complicated answer is that no one can really tell you if it's worth it. I will say it ranges from $30 a month to $100 a month, which, again, as a former LinkedIn employee, I will now admit is a really high price tag. And what you get from LinkedIn Premium is access to LinkedIn Learning, which is awesome and has such a wide variety of things that you can learn, but isn't necessarily like a must in life. It also gives you access to unlimited searches of people. So if you're in a sales focused job and you really need to search for people that are decision makers at companies, or if you are really looking for a job actively and you think you want to be like searching and reaching out to people, it could be worth it for that. And then it also gives you insights into job postings. So it will tell you if you're considered like a top applicant for a job based on just like parsing things from your profile. It'll also give you information on the other people who have applied to that job via LinkedIn. So it'll tell you their education level or where they're located and stuff like that. So it's totally up to you if that kind of thing is like worth it for you. But at the end of the day, it is a high price tag. And I think that it's very possible to navigate LinkedIn and have great LinkedIn without it. And I say all that to bring us back to LinkedIn Learning as a tool is awesome. And we also got a lot of questions about the skills section of our profile. And via LinkedIn Learning, you can actually get badges that will live on your profile. So if you complete courses in a certain topic, you can add that to your profile. To show that you completed that course. Now, skills in general, I think are great. And when you apply to a job, LinkedIn will tell you the skills that the recruiter has sort of like plugged in that they're looking for that are parsed from the job listing. And when you have LinkedIn Recruiter pulled up, the resumes are essentially listed in order the same way that when you search for people on LinkedIn, the people are listed. And by optimizing for the same skills that are listed in the job listing, you can show up higher in that list, but it is not necessarily going to get you the job because that recruiter is still going to be looking at your resume and checking that you have those skills. Now, so that's more of like a game you can play when you're applying to a specific job. You can list those specific skills in your LinkedIn profile and hope that you just kind of show up higher. Aside from that, I think listing skills is not super important unless you're in a field that's super technical. So I always say to people who are like computer engineers and you want to showcase that you know certain like coding languages, then maybe it's important for you to list all of those as skills. Or if certifications are required for a certain job that you're applying for, it's a smart idea to list those on your profile. But if you're doing things that are really generic, like communications or networking, it's not necessary to have that listed in your skills section. And it's not necessary for you to go onto LinkedIn Learning and show that you've completed courses in that.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Emma. You've dropped tons of gems of wisdom for us. And thank you all to everyone who submitted questions with your registration as well. Emma, you covered a lot in terms of the questions that we had, but there were some that kind of added to some adjacent topics that we didn't get to. So one of the questions that we received is, how can I indirectly signal to companies and recruiters that I'm open to opportunities, and can my current employer see this?
It's a really good question. So one thing I will say is if we want to be really on the down low about how we're signaling it, creating content's a great way, and kind of just like putting yourself out there as a thought leader and somebody with a lot of opinions is going to kind of unintentionally solicit a lot of people asking you for advice or hoping to hire you for things. So that's one really, really low key way to do it. Other than that, there is an opportunity for you on LinkedIn when you're editing your profile to say that you're open to opportunities. And you can specifically list what kind of opportunities that you're open to. And when you say that you're open to opportunities, you're given the option to make it public to everybody on LinkedIn, which adds a open to work banner that a lot of you have probably seen on people's profile photos, or you can make it open only to recruiters. Now, what I will say about this is that LinkedIn does make an effort to make your recruiter visibility not visible to people who work at your company, but it is AI driven and just like filter driven. So there are going to be cracks in that system. So it's kind of impossible when you turn that on to get 100% certainty that nobody from your company is going to see it. So an example of that would be like if your company hires an external recruiter to work for your company, technically that person would be able to see it because they're not listed as working at your company on their LinkedIn profile. Now, the chances of that person seeing that you're open to work and like finding your boss and telling them are probably pretty low. I think people kind of know what LinkedIn's about. So they respect that a little bit, but you can technically limit people from your company from seeing it.
That's really helpful. And I've seen those open to work banners as well. So it's good to know that you can tend to control the background, but like you said, it's still open for opportunity. And another question that came up a lot in the registration questions is premium worth it? Right? We'll see sometimes the prompters that come up from LinkedIn or, to send certain people certain notes. What's your take on that?
Yeah, like I said, I think it's a pretty big price tag. The cheapest premium is $30 a month and gives you kind of like limited access to some of the premium things, which is just a big price tag to pay. Kind of on the same front of like making people aware that you're open to work. I think there's a little bit of a general consensus on LinkedIn that if you have premium, that you might have it temporarily because you're looking for a job. So I think turning on premium for like a small period is good to get attention from recruiters and, maybe like get that going. But again, that's visible to your current employer. And also I think it's totally possible to get a job without premium. So, and somebody in the chat actually asked about like free trials for premium, and people who have premium are given, I think, 2 free trial codes for a year, and they last for 6 months. So if you're looking for a job, I think it's very worthwhile, if you're publicly looking for a job, even to post on LinkedIn and say, hey, I'm looking for a job. Would anyone be willing to share their premium code with me? Or if you're not, to maybe message some people that have premium on and ask them if they'd be willing to give it to you. Because if you're looking for a job, 6 months could be plenty of time for you to kind of like do it for free and get a job from that.
Absolutely. And we have some really good questions coming in. One that Janet mentioned, kind of this concept of managing your connection requests. So any guidance on which invitations to connect to accept? I get some from some pretty random people once in a while. I'm not sure how to handle those. So I know we talked about this before the session as well.
Yes. So if I can give you guys any advice, if you're concerned about your connection request, go into your settings on LinkedIn and carefully read all of your settings. So there are ways for you on LinkedIn to limit almost everything. So there are ways for you to limit who's able to view your profile, who's able to send you a connection request, and then even once they're connected with you, who's able to message you. And I know we got a couple of questions before this about how can I prevent like unsolicited sales pitches via LinkedIn Messenger, which I'm sure we've all gotten over the years. And there's ways to limit that in your privacy settings. So please go through and carefully read who is able to message you. Something that I did, especially when I worked at LinkedIn and I got like a ton of random LinkedIn connection requests, was you can actually make it so that people on LinkedIn cannot connect with you unless they have your email address. So it really limits it to people who have like actually worked with you, who are maybe like in your inbox right now and are looking to connect with you. And the other people will be driven to actually like follow you on the platform instead of connect with you. So that's really if you want to keep it locked down. And then other than that, I would say don't be afraid to not accept people's connection requests. They don't get a notification that you didn't accept them. I tend to only accept people that I have mutuals with or that I've actually worked with. But I'm also I accept a lot of people. So if you're trying to be like more locked down than me, then maybe you're like, I'm not going to accept them unless I've actually worked with them.
That's good to know that we can kind of curate our LinkedIn experience.
Yeah, totally. I think people do not play around enough with their privacy settings. And you can really, LinkedIn is a really data sensitive company. And so you can really kind of control what they're storing from you as well and what they're looking at. I want to call out, Dan asked about like an unemployment gap in your job history. So LinkedIn actually has this really cool feature now where you can add in sort of like alternative work as your job history. So you can say that you were a full-time parent, you can say that you were traveling or that you were studying for a degree or an advanced degree. So those are pretty well received. They're pretty new on LinkedIn. And when we released them, there were a lot of studies about recruiters sort of like tolerance for them, and they seem to be really, really well received. So don't be afraid to call out on there that you had a section of time where you were freelancing or traveling or studying or whatever.
Did not know that. We were giving us all sorts of tips and tricks, which that was the intent. That was the intent of
Yes.
this paper. And so also this recording will be sent in the follow-up email and the thank you email tomorrow. So that way, if you want to go back and look at some things as well. And want to let you all know, Emma alluded to this at the top of the hour about how Duke DC has some great programming due to the regional volunteer leaders and also Louise Meyer, who always works magic in the background, and wanted to share a few upcoming events that we have. One is a board meet and greet, January 25th at the Duke and DC office. So that will be regional volunteer leaders who will be present to answer your questions about getting involved. So that's in Duke DC, Women's Forum, Global Duke Alumni Board, and National Affinity Boards as well. And then also every month, there's an advanced job networking session. And this is virtual, so you can join from your home, from the comfort of work, your home. And the next one we have is on February 12th. And so it's mid to senior level alum with a minimum of 10 years career or professional experience if you're searching for another opportunity. And then finally, March 6th, we have an all-industry networking night at the Duke and DC office. So we will put in the chat the events calendar, so that way there's far more events as well, whatever tickles your fancy. But we thank you all for joining us tonight and hope you all have a great evening.